Hello there, you're watching the Press Preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. And it's time to see what's making the headlines with the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and the associate editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire. And I'm very pleased to say that they're going to be with us right through until midnight for our extended news review. So a very good evening.
Hi, Anna.
So let's take a look first at what's on the front pages. And the Metro reacts to the resignation of the government's education catch-up czar, Sir Kevin Collins, over plans and funding for post-COVID teaching. The paper turns its fire on the Education Secretary, declaring it's an F for failed Gavin. That's also the lead for the Daily Telegraph, which describes Sir Kevin's resignation statement as scathing. The Daily Mail reports that foreign holidays are under threat thanks to the spread of a new COVID-19 variant. The Guardian carries a report into Generation Z, and how badly young adults have been impacted by the policies needed to control the pandemic. And the Financial Times leads with a complicated story about commodities trader Trafigura Credit Suisse, Greensill Capital and steel magnate Sanjeev Gupta. So Andrew Pearce and Kevin Maguire here with me tonight. And good to see you both. Let's kick off with the Daily Telegraph, shall we, Andrew? Because it's got a story on its front page, which at least a couple of the papers are leading with tomorrow. And this was the resignation of the government's education catch-up czar, the man put in to try and formulate a plan to make sure that children got up to speed with the education that they'd missed. He's quit, and it's covered in the papers. What do you make of this?
It's hugely embarrassing, actually, for the government, because Sir Kevin Collins was only appointed in February. He's a pretty well-respected figure. He's a former teacher. He's pretty hot on the 3 Rs. He's worked in educational charities for the last decade. The Treasury are never, ever going to agree to demands for £15 billion to get schools back where they were a year ago. But they came so well short. What was it? 1.4 billion. Admittedly, there was an extra 1.5 billion last year, but so that's 3 billion. So Kevin was asking for more like 15 billion pounds. And the hapless Gavin Williamson was put out today. He's the education secretary, the worst education secretary I can ever recall, to be honest. He had to do the broadcast rounds today. He didn't even know when he was asked, how much does this money equate to per child, per head? He didn't know. He had to be told it was £50. Now, Kevin Collins is saying it's not even that much in primary schools. It's more like £20. And look, one of the biggest losers in the pandemic have been school kids. They lost a whole year of their education. Some of them were very lucky. They got very good online teaching. They were often in the better schools, the middle class schools, the private schools. I'm sad to say the kids in the poorer areas, the disadvantaged areas, the kids who've got more difficulties at school struggled much more during the pandemic, and they needed to be helped. But Rishi Sunak has blocked this, so Dishy Rishi, the gloss comes off him just a little bit here. But I'm afraid it's also a failure of the Education Secretary. He couldn't argue his way out of a wet paper bag, to be honest. He's got no voice in Cabinet, no authority, nobody respects him, nobody rates him. But ultimately, the buck stops with at the top.
Well, yes, and if we move on to the Metro, Kevin, they have it. They've aiming their criticism at Gavin Williamson as well. They say it's an F for failed Gavin. I mean, do you think that's fair, given that it appears to be the Treasury that has blocked this demand for money to try and help children and granted about a tenth of what was asked for, it appears?
I think, Anna, is both fair and unfair. Fair in the sense that Gavin Williamson is the Education Secretary, has a woeful track record. Go back to last summer and the big problems over algorithms and exam results, which he had to back off and U-turn on. Then there was all the problems just before last Christmas and then early January when he was insisting schools must be open, threatening Greenwich Council in London, who happens to be Labour-controlled. He ignored the Tory councillors who are in the same position, who said they might have to close schools early because they were worried about the spread of the virus. And then he was bullying schools and local authorities to reopen in January, reopened a day, and then they shut again. he just lurches from crisis to crisis. So I think the criticism of him is fair. I suppose what is unfair is it's not him alone. And yes, it is Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, Winchester head boy back in the day, £40,000 a year, nice private education for him. When, as Kevin Collins makes clear, it will be working class kids and those in the north, where the Prime Minister is supposed to be levelling up, not holding back kids, who will suffer most. And then, of course, the other guilty figure in this is the Prime Minister, who's talked a very good game, using all sorts of superlatives and so on about how the government will get this education recovery programme going. And then when the man he appoints comes up with a plan, he only gets a tenth of the money that he thought he would get. So I think Johnson and Sunak are in there with Williamson as the guilty trio here, and they're going to fail kids. These are kids who could suffer for the rest of their lives. There was a report some time ago that their incomes could be lower throughout their lives because of this. So it's really a matter of national importance. And Johnson has said that time after time, talking about huge, massive programs, and then he comes up with something that the person he appointed to come up with a plan says just is not enough.
OK, and Andrew, how do you think that other Tory MPs will react to this? I mean, will they have some sympathy with Rishi Sunak? A huge amount of money has been spent on the pandemic. Will they say it's not a bottomless pit, we can't keep spending?
They will say that, but it's just the fact that and I have a lot of sympathy with that too. But it's just that the financial settlement that Sunak, the Chancellor, has agreed is come so woefully short of what Kevin Collins wanted. And my worry about this is this: look, these kids have already lost a year. We know the Chancellor's probably going to announce more money for schools to recover in the autumn statement. But that's now. That's then. We need these kids to really be recovering in the summer. We want them to be able to perhaps stay after school, summer schools. We want them to be able to perhaps have an extra half an hour at the end of the day. All of that could have come from that money that Kevin Collins wanted. And my worry is that some of these children don't have time to wait to the autumn statement. They need to get some of this back. They need to, because if you talk to teachers, head teachers, they say that year they lost last year is almost irretrievable. And so waiting till the autumn statement for perhaps there may be more money, more jam tomorrow, I just don't think it's good enough, really. And I think many Tory MPs, while understanding the financial constraints, will be disappointed and really rather cross. OK, and
let's move on to another issue in the government's inbox, if you like. This is travel. Back on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, they cover this with talking about the green list potentially being culled, because tomorrow we do get the first major review, don't we, Kevin, of the travel system. Obviously, more countries will want to go onto the green list, but the suggestion here is it could go in the other direction.
No, that's right. And there'll be a meeting of the Joint Biosecurity Centre to discuss those 12 countries, whether any are added, but it seems now it's more likely they're going to be taken away. And there's this question that Portugal, which is one of the real destinations on that list, I don't think many people are flying down to the Falklands at the moment, a bit of a long way to go and not very hospitable in the middle of the winter down there. So Portugal's where people's going, and there's this speculation it may be taken off. Now, the Department of Transport is saying it's all speculation, but Grant Shapps is due to update the nation. And when Boris Johnson says he will have no hesitation in acting if there is a problem in somebody like Portugal, well, that will be a first, given his 2-3 week delay over India and 20,000 people, possibly some infected coming in from that country, because he delayed a decision because he wanted to go and have a photo call with the leader there. But now it seems that people booking summer holidays abroad now is an absolute gamble. You pay your money and you take your chance, because you may not actually get there. And so instead of the list being expanded, it could be narrowed again. It's probably good for British and hoteliers and restaurateurs and pub owners, but for the travel companies that operate and send people abroad, it's an absolute nightmare. A lot of people do want to go abroad, and they may be frustrated yet again.
And if we look at the Daily Mail, your paper, of course, Andrew, perhaps a suggestion there of what the government's worried about. They're worried about variants coming into the country, of course, which is why they may be stricter on travel policies than others might want. So what's your paper suggesting tomorrow?
Well, we're now saying, we've got this exclusively, that ministers are now concerned about yet another variant that's been identified. It's from Nepal. Now, at some point, we'll be told we can't call it the Nepal variant. We'll have to give it another stupid name from the Greek alphabet, which is ridiculous, frankly.
Is it ridiculous? Isn't the idea that you don't give a stigma to a particular country and it just...
Look, the whole world is suffering from COVID, so I don't think India's been particularly stigmatised. They had a massive crisis with COVID, and it was a terrible scenes in India. I don't see why I've got to call it Delta. I'm sorry, I'm going to carry on calling it the Indian variant. We still call it the Kent variant, don't we? For God's sake. So, but I think this is being used as an excuse by ministers because there is a growing view that actually the government do not want people to go on holiday abroad for two reasons. They're worried about variants being brought in. Well, for once I agree with Maguire. They should have got the Indian red list sorted out a bit quicker, but because they want people to stay here and spend their money here, and and that's laudable in a way. But I wish they'd just be honest about it, actually, because if they are going to make it really difficult for us to go abroad, we don't want to start spending out on a holiday to Portugal if we then discover in 2 days' time it's on the amber list, and then there are all sorts of problems then with quarantining, and you've got to have all these extra tests taken, which cost an absolute fortune, and we're still charging VAT for all these tests, and other countries don't. So I think the government are playing a crafty game here. They just don't want us to go abroad, and I'm not going abroad.
OK, I'll find out where you're going on holiday a little later, maybe. But and just to pick out a little line from your copy here in the Daily Mail, a member of the government's SAGE committee said officials shouldn't be overly concerned about this variant. There are thousands of variants, they say. Right. It's a virus that's changing all the time. That's what they say there. We're going to take a pause right now, but don't go anywhere, either of you. We need you for some time yet. Coming up, the multi-billion-pound tanks that can only go 20 miles an hour. We're going to be talking about that after the break. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me tonight, Andrew Pearce and Kevin Maguire. And we're going to turn to a story that's on the front of the Telegraph next, Kevin, aren't we? And this is about a fleet of tanks, but there's an issue that the Telegraph is picking out.
Yeah, it is. It's a 3.5 billion fleet of tanks called it's like Ajax or Ijax. I'm not sure how they're pronouncing them. Anyway, they're US made and they're rubbish.
I can't help you there.
40 miles per hour, but they can't go faster than 20 miles per hour because they're damaging the health of the soldiers inside. They can't reverse backwards over any obstacle higher than 20 centimeters, which is 8 inches. That's not going to be much good in a battle. They're 4 years late. Of one model, they've ordered 589. There's only 14 being delivered. It's yet another defence procurement disaster.
Absolutely right.
Not unique to this government. It's happened under Labour governments, previous Conservative governments. I just can't understand how it's allowed to still go on. And surely when these tanks are designed, they must put them through trials before you get great big bulk orders. It seems these manufacturers take huge amounts of public money and then provide very poor equipment for the armed forces. And it's incredible. It happens year after year, decade after decade.
Andrew, you're nodding away there. Do you agree with that?
I'm afraid I agree. You know, back in the 1980s, Michael Heseltine, when he was the Defence Secretary, you never saw him out of a flak jacket, to be honest. He brought in a man from the city called Peter Levine to sort out defence procurement. And for a few years, they seemed to get it right. But ever since, it's been chaotic. The budget's overrun. Ships and planes are late. And this is just an embarrassment. But why did we buy American tanks in the first place? Why didn't we buy British tanks? Why can't we buy British? Perhaps now we've got a fantastic defence armaments industry. Buy British. I mean, maybe they'd have been just as bad. But this is embarrassing. And we need a statement from the Defence Secretary. I don't think we're going to see him at the wheel of the tank like we famously saw Missy Sack at the wheel of a tank. Do you remember all those years ago? She looked rather magnificent. But I don't suppose we're going to see Boris or the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, with this tank in particular.
Kevin, I'm going to cut in. I'm going to cut in, I'm afraid, and be very rude because I do want to get one more story in from the Metro, something I'm sure you're looking forward to, a holiday to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. There are details in the Metro.
Well, Kevin can't go on that holiday.
Kevin,
Why not?
are you looking forward to it?
You're a Republican. You're a Republican. You can stay at work. You don't want to be celebrating it. You're a Republican. Outrageous.
Look, that family has been on welfare benefits for decades. It's about time poor taxpayers like me got something back. It might only be one day. I'll give it up if we can be a republic, but otherwise...
You can only if you go to a street party and behave properly and sing God Save the Queen, can you have some time off?
You know, nobody will do that except a few monarchists who kind of need their heads seen to. You know that never happens on these weekends. People just go down the pub, spend time
I don't
with
know
their
what I've
family.
started. I'm going to have to stop it there. I don't know why I thought I could do that story quickly. We're out of time.
There'll be street parties everywhere.
Okay,
I'm having one.
Andrew and Kevin, thanks very much indeed for the moment.